Hey YouTube. Alright, so I'm back with another quick video. This is a deep clean and reassembly of an 1858 Remington black powder cap and ball revolver. This one came to me from the same guy that I did the cylinder work for in an earlier video, but his basement took on some water and things rusted up, and he said, well, the thing worked when I took it apart and gave you the cylinders, and now I can't get the action to work. So I disassembled it off a camera yesterday and found a couple of rusted parts on the inside. So I'm just going to go ahead and do a real good cleanup and reassembly and see if we can get this thing working. So I use, for cap and ball cleaning, I use a lot of Q-tips. I use just old-fashioned Hops number 9, and then I've got some old gun oil that I'm trying to use up. This is Otter's brand, and I need to find my patches, cleaning patches. There they go. And so I've got a whole bunch of cleaning patches, and I just have a simple large caliber, I don't even know what that's called, cleaning jag of some sort. So I'm going to start with the cylinder. Try not to spill this all over the place. All right, so you can use a pretty large patch on the large bore handguns. Since the chambers are bottomed out on these, meaning they're not drilled all the way through like your typical modern revolver, I pull it through just a little bit, and then I fold it over once and twice back on top of itself, and then kind of wad it up like it's a ginormous Q-tip. And then just get a little bit on the patch. It wicks it up pretty good. All right, and now I'm just going to feed that into each one of these bores. All right, and I'm going to turn it around and around. This is just to get it soaking. So I'm not being real picky about how clean the patch is. I'm just trying to get some cleaning solvent into each one of these bores so that it starts activating. Really doesn't look too bad in the bottom of this thing. I'm going to go ahead, and the center pin on the Remingtons is smaller diameter. It's about, I don't know, pretty close to 30 caliber. Just for simplicity's sakes, I'm going to put two Q-tips together, like so. One of them has been dipped in the special sauce, Hops number 9. And then I just kind of wedge that into that center hole. Can you hear it? And twist that in. And we got a little bit of gunk to come. All right, and then one other thing that I have not done yet. I'm going to get into my muzzle loading pistol toolkit. I have not removed the percussion cap nipples from this gun, but it's always ideal when you're cleaning that you remove these. All right, so it's a special little T-shaped wrench. It's got a kind of a slot cut through it with a hole in the center for the nipple. And then you just get a good purchase on it and get it to crack loose. If this is not done every cleaning, you can very quickly get to a point where they are no longer removable. All right, so kind of critical. Oh yeah, you can see some rust on the threads. So let's see if I've got a really small medicine bottle anywhere. I think I threw them all away. That's about right. This cap will work. So I'm just going to hold this over my trash can in case I spill a little bit. I'm going to pour just a little bit of solution into this cap. That's what's good about these old jars. I've hung on to this one for a long time. It's still glass. Just keep refilling it as it, runs low. I get the cheap plastic containers and refill it and keep using it. I don't know, I like the old containers, the old metal gunpowder cans. I like the old glass bottles. Just reminds me of an era that's bygone. So this is a Pieta manufactured Remington. And there's basically two main Italian manufacturers left that's imported that we're bringing these into the country with, that are making them pretty close to identical to the way they were in the late 19th century. So I'm just going to, inside these threads of the cylinder, I'm just putting a little bit of hops inside there right now to let that kind of run and chase the threads. I don't want to really run the risk of wedging any cotton fuzz, leaving that behind, because that can make it difficult in the future. Now I'm just going to clean around from where the percussion caps fragment. Some percussion caps are worse than others about having mercury in them. And then see how black that's getting? That eats or corrodes at gun parts, steel parts, pretty bad. So black powder is pretty hard on gun metals too. So that's why it's easy to clean when it's fresh, just soap and water. Most of the time you don't have to have specific chemicals. I could have quite easily have just soaked all these parts in a tub of warm water with some Dawn and gone after cleaning it too. So you don't have to have the solvent, but I like the solvent. I have it. So that's soaking. That Q-tip is done. So what ended up being the problem with this gun is there was some rust on the hammer pivot bolt screw, but and it's still not quite cleaned up to where it wants to just seat in there and turn like a bearing. So I'm gonna have to work on that a little bit more. But right here, the smaller one, that is a really specialized little removable screw that only threads down so far, but it has the cylinder advancement hand is attached to that and sits on that. Like so, inside the gun. And then that comes out and pushes the cylinder up and around to the next chamber as that hammer is cocked. And then when it fires, it just seats back down. What happened is there was just enough surface rust on the hammer and on this screw that it was not allowing the spring to push this hand forward inside the gun frame to advance the cylinder. So it had everything locked up in a bind. So that was my findings. And now it is all about rectifying, cleaning, and reassembling. So I did soak most of these parts with hops last night so that they could sit overnight. I'm going to put just a little bit more on there. I don't know if you can see how crunchy and fouled that is. Let's see here. It's wanting to focus in on my hand. But it has got some junk on it. And most of your shooters, they will claim what they can see because they can get to it. And these guns do not come with disassembly instructions for disassembling all the way down to gunsmithing level teardowns like this. So it's no surprise. This is a friend of mine, and he has run, he claims, well over 1,000 rounds out of this gun, and I believe him. But I can also say that with the grime and gook that I found, this has been its first disassembly. Percussion caps. All right, so that hammer sits inside of this slot here. You can kind of see my finger through there. All right, and that slot, that hammer also fits all the way down in here. So when the gun goes off, most of the gases come through this point. So most of the time with these Remingtons, what gets nasty is the cylinder rotation pin, and that's what locks them up. That was not the case because he brought this out of the gun safe without the cylinder, and you couldn't open, you couldn't cock it, couldn't work the action. So, but on the back side, there's a little bit of that black powder smoke that puffs out. If you watch it on slow motion, there's just a little bit of action that happens inside here. It's completely covered by the hammer, but the gases travel down inside to the business end of the inner mechanics of these guns. So I'm guilty. I do not disassemble mine all the way down to this point every single time I shoot it. I usually reserve this for once a year for my own. He bought this when he was 30 years ago, when he was 21, and we're going to get it cleaned up. All right. Stop talking and start doing, I think. All right, this is my hammer pivot pin bolt. I have misplaced my magnetic map. Doesn't surprise me. This was the trouble child. You can just barely see it in between my fingers here. Old toothbrushes are handy for cleaning guns. I guess if you were old school Army, it was probably good for cleaning around toilets when you were in trouble, but I never had to do that. I'm just going to use something that I have found and noticed over the years with hops is it's a gentle enough solvent that it does not dissolve the plastic on toothbrushes. I have used toothbrushes for cleaning carburetors and gasoline engines and stuff like that for the same thing, scrubbing the carbon and the fouling off. that accumulates, and the carburetor cleaners are much more harsh, and these will eventually start gluing themselves to your fingers because the plastic is turning into a mucky, mushy glue. All right, I need to get just a little bit of a copper wool going here. There is, I don't know if you can see it, but that right there, that's some of that carbon I was telling about that has attached itself into the side of that hammer, and the nylon bristles. This is just copper mesh, copper cleaning mesh. It's about impossible to actually remove any of that steel, but it does work on the carbon. But it's not having a really good effect for me. Not on this. Boy, this stuff is really in there. Well, now I'm looking at, I'm going to have to do a little gunsmithing now that I got that clean. I can see at some point in this gun's history, it has been dry fired onto a nipple. Let me see if this will show up on camera. There is a burr on the side of the hammer right there that I'm tickling on. Most importantly, on the face, if you look at it, there is a circular indentation, and that's going to line up and match with one of these nipples. So the gun got fired, dropped, the hammer got dropped onto a nipple, whether intentionally or unintentionally. Caps do fall off. But this one was definitely dropped. I am going to move this. I don't want it to shake all over the place off camera while I'm working with a file. It's definitely hardened. You can hear it skating. I'm having to use quite a bit of pressure to remove that burr. All right, let's see what I've got on this other side. Yeah, I'm not going to try to get that indentation off the face. I don't think that's going to hurt anything enough. this little teeny tiny screw glad that the cylinder advancement hand rotates on. I was super worried that I was not going to get that to loosen up and come out. And the reason that it has to come out on this Remington, Colts you don't have this. Colts has got a pin that is just, I don't know if it's soldered in place or if it was machined in place. But in order to get this to go back together, it's a little game of Tetris that has to be played. So the hammer has to come in from the top, come down past the frame, down here. The advancement hand has to get put up onto it and line that up. Now, there's not enough room to do this with this pin or with this little screw / pin still in place. So that was why I was really concerned about this one, because it had never been apart. I do not know if the original Remingtons that were made in 1858 had that feature. All right, now it's just a matter of getting that to come back up. And there we go. The cylinder hand advancement hand is through its correct placement in the frame. And I just about have the alignment on the alignment lined up on the hole. Clean some of this gunk out. Line this hole up. Now, with the clean side of this toothbrush, with the clean side, I'm going to apply a little bit of gun oil. I'm going to run that through the pivot hole. That's a bearing surface. And then touch the threads on the other side of the gun. I'm going to go ahead and lubricate the threads on the pivot bolt. Still getting a little bit of rust to come off of this thing. It's pretty, wasn't lost, but it was close. All right, lubricate this shaft. On these internals, on your modern guns, you really don't want to use way too much oil, because it kind of attracts dust and gook and stuff. But most of these cap and ball revolvers are no longer being carried for personal protection, so they're not in dusty environments. I'm more worried about being able to take it back apart if he waits another 5 years to shoot this thing and then decides to disassemble it. It's more about, that's not quite the right screwdriver. I don't like to use that one. Let me see what else I can come up with. I cannot stress enough that having a screwdriver that fits properly when you're working on guns is highly critical. If you slip while you're assembling and trying to tighten, they're easier to strip. And let's see if this one is. Yeah, that one's just still a little bit too big. All right, that one's going to give me the right purchase. Wish it was wider, but you know what they say about wishing. All right. This is why you have to check your gun screws from time to time, is because this little screwdriver, I'm not going to be able to get near the torque I want on it. I could put a socket on the end of that. All right, so when it goes down, the advancement hand is out of the way. It's cocking, the spring is riding freely. Let's put the cylinder in and see what she wants to do. Half cock. All right. Oh yeah, back in business. All right. All right. Hops is pretty good. Now, it leaves a little bit of a lubricant behind. It definitely displaces water. And the advantage it has over WD-40 is that WD-40 gets tacky over time. And it'll freeze up the actions on guns. And be like, well, we cleaned it with WD-40 25 years ago and we can't get it to work. Well, it turns into a gum after a while. That's why gun oil and gun solvents are designed the way they are. They might smell bad and they might be expensive. Yeah, that bore was pretty clean. But at the end of the day, like if I forget to oil any of these parts, this is going to still allow it to sit in a gun safe for years and years and years. All right, so that's ready for the mainspring, which I don't know if I'm ready to do that yet or not. Yeah, might as well. All right, mainsprings are tricky and not a lot of fun. All right. I'm going to go ahead and just oil this liberally. I had a devil of a time getting this to drift out of its slot. So we're going to push this up into place. Yep, that's correct. All right, so there's a notch in the back of the hammer that spring rides in. Now, for the difficult part, you got to get this far enough out of the way and put it in a bind in order to get it inside this little bitty slot. And my fingers, this is rough on the fingers, especially with all that oil on there. I may have to get a pair of pliers to put this thing into the bind. Ah, so close. Now, I don't know how my mallet's going to fare on this, but I got that to start. Yeah, I'm going to need something a little bit less merciful than this mallet. Something that'll give a sharper transfer. Maybe this will be what I need. All right, I need a more stable work surface. That was the trick. All right, I've got her. She's still just a little bit proud. Okay, I use a brass drift here, that way I don't do too much damage. And I use my needle noses to take up some of this impact. I'm gonna have to take it back over to this other workbenches. They're solid. All right, now I've got that spring set in its hole. And on this gun, unlike the Colts, there is a screw that is in the frame. And if you can see, the spring is doubled over here at the very end. So that is designed so that the spring, I guess, cannot come out, even though it's under a bind and so much tension. It is probably one of those parts that if you had to pick a screw in an entire firearm that just disappears, that would be the one. So I'm going to just add to the bind just a little bit. I gave it about a half a turn after it touched. All right. Oh yeah. Oh man. That spring really needs to be relaxed. That is, good grief. I guess that's what makes race guns, is that spring is probably so thin and relaxed that it's not long for the world. Okay, so before I get too far ahead of myself, there is a pivot screw, the trigger, and then this is what pops through the bottom of the frame to lock the cylinder in place. All right, that's the correct orientation. We're going to disassemble, give this a good thorough cleaning. And since that's another pivot point, we're going to oil it pretty good too. Yeah, I can feel some roughness in this piece. Let's go after this one with some of the scouring pad. Yeah, I'm uncovering some rust, but all I'm going to try to do is get this feathered down towards nice and smooth rust. This one's gross enough, it needs a little bit of 220 paper. Yeah, the rust wasn't real deep, it's just surface mainly. It was gross enough I had to get a piece of 220. Sandpaper, that is, not electric bolts. Otherwise it would be a very shocking experience. Ba-doom-doom. All right, I like to put them back down how they need to be oriented going into the gun. Double check this trigger, look for any burrs. Now would be the time to file any burrs off. I would not, I inspected the hammer, and while some guys will file away on the hammer in order to make a lighter trigger pull, the best way to do these is to actually add and solder a metal shim in place and then file it back, because you can't ever add metal to the hammer after you've destroyed it. So anyway, this is the orientation. Goes into the gun like this. Now the trick becomes feeding these two in Might be better to do one at a time. This goes on the far side of the hammer on the inside. Yep, there we go. I heard a click. Then the trigger goes on the near side. Let me check the holes. Let me align that first piece first. Okay, let's get the trigger in place. I don't remember oiling that. I know I oiled the pivot pin. Let me go ahead and get a little oil on this wear surface there. All right, so part of taking things apart and putting them together, obviously, is having the correct size screwdriver that fits deeply into the slot and as wide as possible to mimicking the actual slot width. All right, just gonna snug that. I'm not gonna overly tighten it. All right, so there's still no spring on that, but that is the next step. We're gonna flip this thing upside down. We're gonna take the spring. This is a miniature leaf spring. Pretty simple little design. If these certain manufacturers, I think later model, I've read somewhere that the Pietas within the past 5 years of manufacture, this part is particularly prone to snapping, which told me that they probably had a batch of these that was heat treated incorrectly and not tempered back enough to where they would be flexible without breaking. But they mail these parts out. When you do break them, they're pretty good about replacing them. All right, so you see there's a longer leaf and a shorter leaf. The longer leaf makes contact with a flat on the trigger. It's not going to show really good. Too bad. All right, so I'm just going to put this on the flat of that trigger, and then the short one's going to automatically push up against the cylinder lockup part. Now, this takes the shortest screw there is, probably the easiest to drop. This is why you don't ever, if you can have a big tabletop that's just full of magnets, that would be most ideal for doing work like this. That way when you drop a little screw, you're not cussing and looking all over the place. I definitely wouldn't ever have carpet under me, because this little thing would just disappear, never to be seen from or heard of again. All right, I don't want to over tighten that yet. Okay, now the trigger's working. The cylinder rotation lockup piece is working. The advancement hand worked fine. Hammer is dropping just fine. All right, I think I'm getting close to the point of being ready to button this dude up. So, that should be shiny brass, but you see all that? That's smoke and soot and charred carbon and everything from 1,000 rounds that's made its way from all the way up here to all the way down here. Now, your finger's protected, but all that crap that why that gun was locked up, that's still right there. Now, I've got Brasso that if I really wanted to, I would just polish the heck out of this piece so it looked brand spanking new again. But my friend, you can buy your own Brasso. There's one screw that you take off to take this part off. Just don't lose it. And then you can do this next time. I'm just going to get the bulk of the carbon off. And then slip the trigger through here. There's a little notch, like a hinge that hinges into. Set that piece home. Another short screw, but a whole lot easier to grip. Set that in the hole. It helps having magnetic screwdrivers. Guys, I'll be real honest with that, but finding gunsmithing sized screwdrivers that are magnetized, oh boy, when you find them, they are quite proud of the price. All right, so now the trigger guard is back in place. The inside of it's been cleaned, the inside of the frame is clean. The hammer is holding back. Cylinder lockup is holding back. Let's reinsert the cylinder. All right, in order for these to work, this is just under spring load. So you can force a cylinder in past that even if that's sticking up. But you need the gun to go to half cock on these Remingtons. All right, that timing, the hand that operates the timing of the cylinder, or the cylinder advancement, is going to stick out and engage the cylinder as it goes in. So you have to actually roll just a little bit to get that cylinder to go in enough that it pushes that advancement hand back against its spring. And then you can secure the rotation pin. It is still hanging up just a little bit on this left hand side of the hammer, but I do not feel any kind of a burr anymore. Let me just go ahead and file on that dude just a little bit more. That ain't a really good way of filing on that without scratching the gun. I may have to do a disassembly video after all. Alright, when removing a cylinder from an 1858 model Remington, half cock it again. You can pull the center pivot pin out, but you have to start by half cocking it. You don't even have to go totally to half cock. You just have to start to cock it, because then that gets the hammer out of the way. We are going to do a disassembly video. Reverse of what I've done so far, but it's going to be a lot quicker. I don't have to do any cleaning or oiling. Oh man, I'm going to have to fight that mainspring back out. Oh well, you guys want to see that fight. when at all possible, I always try to put the screws back through the holes of what they belong to. Whether I'm working on a car motor or whether I'm working on a gun, it's all pretty much the same. All right, so not super critical on this order. I'm going to go ahead and loosen this gizmo way out of the way. Well, these screws are coming out so much nicer now that they're oily. Trigger. He still doesn't want to just drop completely out on its own, but that's okay. And again, I'm going to set the, even though I know this is how I keep track of stuff and I can walk away and go to dinner, come back the next day, all the screws are with the correct part. You do not want to remove the pivot screw for the hammer while the spring is in place and under tension. Otherwise you will booger up the first thread and you may not get it back together right. So to avoid damaging the threads on that screw, you have to beat this thing. You got to beat it off. Boom, boom. All right, gonna switch to where got a little bit better view. All right, I'm going to use a 1/8 inch drift. Let's see if I got a better pair of pliers. I'm going to use a pair of pliers to support the back of the gun frame. That's not what I'm looking for. That'll do it. I have a brand spanking new gun vise. You would think that I'd have had it set up and ready to go for this video, but of course not. No, that would be too easy. All right, so I'm just setting this up to where, this is so that I can use my drift to get a pretty good purchase on this. I'm actually going to go with a larger drift. I'm going to do damage to that little drift. So let me get one that I very seldom use. Jeez, Mom. Parts are supposed to go flying when you're at this step. Watch out for the jiggles. Alright, now I can take this hammer out and safely remove some more material in order to, and not scratch the heck out of the gun. Alright, so pivot pin. Now you remember, this is different than the Colt. You got to push this assembly down far enough that you get access to that itty bitty screw. Come on, focus in. Nope, that way. All right, there's a little bitty itty bitty screw in there that was rusted up, remember, way back in the beginning. Now I gotta get that guy out. That was the one that I didn't think I was ever going to get loose. This is where I wish I had my magnetic mat. Drop that guy on there. Now I'm going to take the glad hand, or not the glad hand, the advancement hand out. Now the hammer comes back out of the top. Colts, not that difficult. I'm really worried about this little screw going for a roll and search, and I don't like those. So I'm going to stick it back in its hole. I don't even know how long it would take for me to get this replacement screw, because it has a bearing surface and threads, and it is so small. I would hope that would be something that I could write an email and have somebody at Traditions be like, oh yeah, how long ago was that gun made? Yeah, no problem. We keep parts from that far back. All right, so this was the problem side. All right, let's do this. Down you go, up you go. All right. All right, so now I'm putting a lot of downforce down to make sure I'm seated in that screw and giving it its little final twist. Yep, that's working. All right, now the mainspring. So I find it works. If I slide that mainspring in, and then I can look through this little gap right there. I don't know if that's showing up on the camera. And you can see how the spring's kind of not nowhere near the right angle. But by holding that in a way that I can look down on it, I can then grab it with my Super Duper, not made in China, but made in Taiwan instead, aggravating needle noses. And get this thing to start into its slot. And then talk to it like Happy Gilmore. That's your home. That's your home. Is there something wrong with your home? Why won't you go in your home? All right. Only Taiwan made needle noses are approved for hammering mainspring pins into places on Remingtons. Don't ever try to use a good tool. Whew. Watching all my screws go bouncing everywhere. I'm gonna go do this off camera. And again, this little screw doesn't take much. I guess you could probably put more spring tension if you really over tighten it. I don't know. I have a feeling that you'd probably snap the mainspring or strip the screw. So I'm just going to give it, like I said before, just under a half a turn past it touching. Oh yeah, that hammer is definitely not hanging up going by that anymore. All right. Alrighty, that's the most difficult alignment that I've done with one of those cylinder lockups ever, but that's okay. We got it. Always want to be able to start these little screws with your fingers whenever possible. And then most of these screws you want to leave just a little loose until your final assembly. That way, if there's a little bit of wiggling that needs to happen, it can still happen. Now, since there's no wiggling that needs to happen, I went ahead and torqued that double leaf spring retention screw in place. Trigger is working. Lockup pin is working. All right. So reassemble the trigger guard. Trigger's working great. Too many toolboxes. All right. This is a tool. I don't know if you can get these at Lowe's, but any welding supply shop will have them. It's just a little set of round files, wires. Super great for making sure that you've got your percussion nipples cleared out all the way on the inside. And that is where we are right now. All I'm doing is chasing the threads, cleaning carbon off the inside portion of the nipples. I don't know if that plastic is safe for that kind of solvent, but we'll find out. All right, on to the clean Q-tips. And on to a clean patch. In my disorganized chaos, there it is, it fell off, it went down there. Gonna grab my jag, make a great big giant Q-tip again. Gonna chase out all 6 of these holes. Just to give them a little drying. Let's see. Double Q-tip trick again. I'm going to twist in, kind of dry all that out. Pull these things through again. It's still coming a little bit nasty, but it does not look too bad in there. and dry all 6 of the threaded holes. Wow, look at that. So I'm actually twisting this in and then bringing it back out like I'm screwing it in and out. Yeah, now at the bare minimum, every time you shoot these guns, you should be cleaning the cylinder, your business end holes. You should be removing your percussion cap nipples, cleaning and getting rid of the gunk that is in the thread of those holes. And you should be cleaning your nipples and those threads. Now this is where these little torch tip cleaner tools come in perfect. You find the right size that fits the flash hole. That's a little small. That's about perfect. All right. So just kind of making sure there's no rust particles plugging that hole. I would do this before competition too. I would dry all the oil out by firing a set of caps on the nipples to dry out the back of the chambers of the revolver cylinder. And then I would remove the cylinder from the frame of the gun and run this tool through just to make sure that there's no particles plugging, so that when I do load, I have no hang fires or no misfires. So now I'm going to put gun oil onto the Q-tip. Liberally. All right, and I'm going to twist that in and out at the very beginning of each one of those 6 holes so that I can drop and deposit some oil on the threads. And these are not completely fed straight up and down. I don't know if you can see this on the camera. All right, so there is a little bit of an angle that the nipple threads into the back of the cylinder. Not completely straight up and down. Always remember, if it doesn't feel right in the beginning, it's not right. You're cross-threading it, so you want to be able to start it, and it should take no effort for it to start, especially when they're cleaned, the threads are cleaned, and everything's oiled. I just can't get my big old fingers down inside that hole or that recess for the hammer in order to start them by fingers. So I'm just giving each one of these 6 their final tightening. All right, get rid of some of these nasty Q-tips. Oil. A cleaning patch, which is not super clean anymore, but just going to go in, get all 6 of the cylinder bores, a nice coat of oil, twisting it and pulling it in and out, giving it a quick little inspection. Yeah, looks good. While I've got that set up, we're going to go ahead and run it in through the muzzle. All right. Liberally wiping all surfaces. So this is a pivot, the cylinder pivot pin. I'm going to wipe it down good. I'm going to wipe the back of the forcing cone down. All right. So you can see the hammer at the very top is hitting that cylinder. So it does not take much to just open that hammer a little bit and get that to roll in, and then your pivot pin sinks home. Now, for the final step, I noticed that there was just a little corrosion on these hand grips, which is probably, or a hand grip screw, probably because it gets a certain amount of your sweat and oil gets in there. So I'm just using my fingernail to really get in there, and then the oil that was left over from my hand. All right, so walnut grips go on. There's a little screw pin that lines up with a recess hole that's on the inside of the hand grip. All right, it's time to check all the screws one last time, and then oil everything for its last time. So I'm pretty sure, yep, I'm gonna need this other screwdriver for this one. All right, never had that one out. This one. All right, let's give it a final wipe down, put it on half cock. Get my grubby fingerprints off of the cylinders. Doing never forget to oil the muzzle, the crown, where the loading lever goes, loading lever itself. And these are all pretty well protected parts on this gun. There's no rust has penetrated the bluing. All right, there it is. It is ready to go back into his gun safe. I hope you enjoyed that video. It's a whole lot longer than it needed to be. One of these days, I promise I will learn how to edit and fast forward and all of that stuff. But you did see a disassembly and reassembly, assembly, disassembly, reassembly in real time. All right.